Again, in hindsight, it probably should have happened maybe a season or two earlier for Dyche and for Burnley and for Everton. Hi, my name is Mike. Welcome to my vlog about football in general and Burnley FC in particular. A vlog that this week saw Everton knocked out of the Carabao Cup. I wonder if their fans on Saturday will be chanting that that particular competition is corrupt as well. Well, speaking of Everton, 2-0 defeat at home to the Toffees on Saturday. A game that, to be honest, I really wanted that one, even though it was the return, of course, of Sean Dyche. 9 years at the Turf, and when he strode across the pitch, everyone in the ground gave him a huge standing ovation, which obviously he has deserved what he has done for Burnley Football Club. A lot of mixed feelings about seeing him walk across the turf like that and applaud in the way that he did for 9 years. But it was good to see that kind of thing, and then we saw exactly what made Dyche such a successful manager when he was in charge of Burnley. In that Everton came here, they were organised, they were working incredibly hard, they were pressing incredibly hard, they were physical when they needed to be, and they feasted on a team which is not street smart enough, not physical enough, too naive, and makes mistakes. That is what Dyche football is. It capitalises on those mistakes. And, fair play, that isn't a complaint. As I say, we watched it for the best part of 9 years. That Everton side reminded me very much of the side that was the first promotion, the one where we were second in the Championship, the unexpected one, because they were pressing so hard, they were working so hard, they looked absolutely knackered in Everton, they gave 100% all the way through. That is a Dyche team. And it was a bit of a low-key return as well, I thought. I thought there'd be more hype about it, but I wonder if both clubs and the man himself kind of decided that, no, this isn't, the thing that needs to be focused on, which is fair enough. I kind of always felt that Dyche kind of played down the I'll call it the hero worship, the pub name, the whole thing. He always kind of played that down. Some managers and a lot of players, kiss the badge and all that kind of thing. And Sean Dyche never ever did that. He was identified with Burnley Football Club, and Burnley Football Club was identified with him. But he never kind of led the fans or anybody on a merry dance that he's going to be there forever. A couple of his predecessors, let's put it that way. No names, no pack drill. But he never kind of, said that he loves the club to the he wants to be there forever and all that kind of thing. And I always appreciated him for that. He was always I'm a custodian of this club. I will be moving on one day. And obviously when it did happen, then it came as a shock. But in hindsight, it was probably the best thing all round for all parties. Again, in hindsight, it probably should have happened maybe a season or two earlier for Dyche and for Burnley and for Everton. And, managerial careers are like political careers. They always end in failure. They always end with someone getting sacked. No one ever gets to ride off into the sunset with the perfect ending. And Dyche, was no exception to that rule. But it was good to see him back. It was, I'll always have time for him. I'll always have, the utmost respect for the guy. I wish him every success. But I really kind of wanted this one on Saturday, and I wasn't the only one. But no, it wasn't going to happen. It was hope over expectation again. And to be honest, when you looked at the team sheet, when Dyche saw, Dara O'Shea at the back and Hannah Stelkar at the left back, he must have gone, oh, lunch. Because, that is exactly the kind of players that a Dyche team will feast upon for 90 minutes. That isn't a criticism of Delcroix. Delcroix, I don't think he's good enough, but that's not his fault. He's in a situation, I think, where he was brought in last minute. And if Vincent Kompany rings up and you're playing in Belgium and Kompany rings you up and says, do you want to come and play in the Premier League? Of course you're going to take that every single time. But he hasn't had much opportunity. He hasn't had much chance to adapt to the Premier League. And I think it's still a shock that the game is so quick, that the game is so physical. And it was unfortunate that he was thrust into a situation against precisely the wrong team at precisely the wrong moment. Dara O'Shea, I'm getting a bit annoyed with, to be blunt. I'm getting a little bit annoyed with. Okay, he's at fault for conceding 2 out of the last 4 goals that we've had. I'm not going to sort of say his liability or anything like that. It's not the right words, but it is getting annoying. He didn't really have. You couldn't really blame him for the second goal on Saturday because Trafford makes a save. Basically, the ball bounces off him and straight to an unmarked Michael Kean. And that is precisely the kind of goal that sees clubs get relegated. But in that second half, I got so annoyed with seeing him bringing the ball forward and then hitting a beautifully long diagonal pass straight across the field and right onto the head of the opposing fullback. He must have done it 4 or 5 times. And it was like, I know the rest of the team isn't giving him much, but all you're doing is just giving possession away. You're not hitting that, you're not hitting that player at all. And speaking of not hitting the player, how many times did Jacob Brun-Larsen take a corner and fail to clear the first man? A low, flat cross that is not going to clear the first man. Did it over and over and over again. Dwight McNeil was down that corner, smacked it, far post. Onana, back of the net. Trafford flapping at it a bit. Having made, by the way, a beautifully good save from Calvert-Lewin. But at the end of the day, the team is not physical enough. The team is not used to that physical battle. And that isn't saying that Everton were kicking us all over the pitch, unless your name's Dominic Calvert-Lewin. But, it is a physical battle when you play a Dyche side like that. And you kind of have to basically fight fire with fire sometimes. I know people sort of say we need an Ashley Barnes. Well, we don't need Ashley Barnes, but we do need an Ashley Barnes. Because we need that kind of physicality. We need that presence. I followed ice hockey for 30 years now, over 30 years. And one of the things about ice hockey is that if an opposition player takes liberties with your skillful smaller players, then the next time he lines up for a face-off, then opposite him is going to be some guy who's 6'4" with hands of stone and no teeth. And that guy will just skate up and go, hello. If you keep on doing that, then you're going to answer to me. And that's what Ashley Barnes did. If someone took a chunk out of Zarori or out of Manuel Benson, then Ashley Barnes would simply wander over. The next time the guy got the pass, he was getting an elbow in the ribs, he was getting a kick in the shins, he was getting a nip in the back. And we don't have that bastard. We don't have that player in, whether it's midfield, up front or whatever, who will basically, he won't sell his granny to win, he'll sell your granny to win. And we really need that kind of fighter, that kind of presence. But it's not looking like it's going to be coming over the horizon. So we are where we are. We're a naive team, we're a learning team, we're a decent team. But, I'm beginning to not lose hope. That's not the right word. But, I'm kind of like thinking, well, if we get relegated, we get relegated. Good to see Benson back. Good to see Benson playing. And, of course, great to see Lyle Foster back on the pitch. I did say to the people around me beforehand, I didn't think we'd see Foster on the pitch. I kind of thought that maybe he was getting an introduction in terms of a taster of match day and the atmosphere and so on and so forth, and see how he reacted. I don't know. I don't think that J-Rod having a mare was in the plan. I mean, did J-Rod ever get within 5 yards of a header in that first half? I don't know. So Foster comes on. Foster does have that bit of spice about him. He did end up dumping a defender into the advertising hoardings. That combined with, punching out that Nottingham Forest player, he's got a bit of angriness, a bit of spite. And I'm good, good. I'm glad to see it. And obviously I'm glad to see him back. So one of the things that kind of came up pre the Everton game and obviously post is the idea of styles. And, this has been mentioned a few times with Company. Company's got to change his philosophy. He's got to change his approach and blah, 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 blah. Well, you give that team that we have right now to Sean Dyche, they're not going to work. It's not going to work for him. That's just, because that's the beauty of football. There are different styles, there are different types of players. It's about who's better on the day. Certain things work certain ways. But there was a quote a couple of weeks ago on the excellent No Nay Never podcast that kind of got me thinking. And it was a quote from Rich Steele, who's a really good voice on No Nay Never. And he said, and I'll use his words, football has got to a place now where philosophy is more important than results, which is madness. And I thought that was an interesting line, an interesting quote. And I'm not doing this to, any beef or anything like that. As I say, it was just a jumping off point to a thought. And is philosophy more important than results? And a lot of people will say, no, results are what keep you in the Premier League and all that kind of thing. And to an extent, I agree. Should we be more pragmatic? Should we be more Dyche-like? Should we get rid of company and get in a manager who's going to get us the results to keep on the Premier League? It's a line of argument, but I'm not sure it's one I agree with. Because I've been kind of thinking about this. Is philosophy more important than results? And to me, for Burnley Football Club in the Premier League, yeah, it is actually. Because you can have, the concentration on results keep us in the league. You can have bad football and get relegated. And we had that. We had stale, boring, dull football and we got relegated. And right now we have good, attractive, bit dull in terms of, we're not sweeping, scoring loads of goals and all that kind of stuff. And we're probably going to get relegated. But at least it's more interesting watch. But this idea that results are all that matters. Well, we could play efficient, pragmatic, let's call it Allardyce football. And that'll get us what? 14th? It's not going to win us anything. It's not going to... The only way that Burnley are going to get to a semi-final of a cup competition is if the draw is incredibly favourable and everyone else gets knocked out. And that is irrespective of whether we're playing great football, whether we're playing dull football, whether we're playing company ball, whether we're playing Dyche ball. And that, to me, is why philosophy at the moment is more important than results, because I want to see a team out there that is, entertaining, that is trying, which they are, and the results are likely to go against them, but they are battling, they are trying, they are learning, and they are improving. And I'm happy to see that. I'm happy to watch that in the Premier League. Now, in the Championship, it's a little bit different, because obviously, things are a lot more equal. In fact, in terms of equality, Burnley are probably one of the top sides when it comes to the Championship in terms of budget and all that kind of thing, due to parachute payments. So yeah, there is a certain level of expectation where results take perhaps a little bit more importance compared to philosophy than they do in the Premier League. Because ultimately, what do we want when we're in the Premier League? What is the goal in the Premier League? If it is just survival for survival's sake, well, I'm not entirely sure that I really want that. I'm not entirely sure a anything goes at all costs philosophy when it comes to staying in the Premier League is what actually I want to watch. Because, like I say, we had that kind of philosophy. We had stale football. And this year's campaign is more enjoyable than the campaign that saw us go down 2 years ago. And that's kind of where it comes to, because what is the club at the end of the day? What is the identity? And that's another word that's used a lot. Identity. What is the identity of Burnley Football Club? Because we're not going to be winning the Premier League any day soon. We're not going to be winning cups without a massive amount of luck that we have no control over. And no matter how hard the club tries, no matter how well the club performs, then the chances of success in Premier League terms is still incredibly small. Now, I know people will point to Brighton. Brighton are probably a model that, Burnley could follow. Brighton are attractive football. They've got they've found players, identified them, and sold them for incredible amounts of money. But speaking of incredible amounts of money, they currently owe their owner the thick end of 400 million quid. So it hasn't been done, on a shoestring or a comparative shoestring like Burnley has been. And here's another thing as well. I'm getting annoyed with this idea in the media and from fans that the 3 teams who got promoted last year are rubbish teams. No, it's not true. Well, Sheffield United apart, probably. But Burnley are not a rubbish team. They're a naive team, like I say. They're a struggling team. They're a young team. They're a team that a couple of years from now will have learned a hell of a lot and be a hell of a lot better. Luton are not a bad team. Luton are a great team. They're an example as a team and as a club that other clubs and teams should be following, even if they're likely to get relegated. So this idea that they're bad teams is completely wrong. What has changed over the last couple of years is the Premier League has got really, really good. It's one of those phases where there is no real mushy middle, where teams are, instead of having one good player, they have several. Even like a Palace or a Fulham have 2 or 3 good players. The top 10 of the Premier League is probably as cutthroat as it's ever been right now. You've got your usual big names. Then you have Brighton and Villa and Newcastle. When Burnley have survived over previous Premier League seasons, it's not just because we've scrapped for everything. Everything went right and everything went to plan from a Burnley perspective. It's also because things went wrong for other clubs. There was always a basket case or two that we could take advantage of. Sunderland, or I think Villa went down, or Fulham went down. Clubs went down because they were a mess. And who in the Premier League right now is a mess? I mean, you can't even say that of someone like Tottenham. Tottenham were always a mess, and Burnley had a pretty good record against them. But they're not a mess anymore. When people turn around and say, it's the worst 3 teams to come up from the Championship, the lowest standard Championship, it's like, no, the Premier League has got so much better this year. The other clubs have stopped screwing up, and that makes it even harder for a club like Burnley to establish itself and to take advantage of those mistakes. But I still think we can do it, because speaking of mistakes, today Forest at the end of the day sacked Steve Cooper, and they sacked someone who had done so much for them, who actually had kept them up in similar circumstances to Company, in the massive turnover of players in the Premier League, unexpected promotion and all that kind of stuff. And this is a gratitude that was shown by the Greek owner, who's brought in Nuno Espirito Santo, which that's an interesting one, isn't it? Now, I think he did a decent job at Wolves, and Wolves tell you they love him and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, well, Wolves, he had an advantage. He had a cheap pipeline of Portuguese players that was coming through at surprisingly reasonable prices. He had that for a few years, and Wolves were very attractive to watch for a couple of years. But once that dried up, Wolves were quite dull to watch and quite staid. And then when he eventually moved on, he went on to Spurs. Again, I think actually Nuno's a good manager, and he went into Spurs after Mourinho, and Mourinho always salts the earth for whoever follows him. But Spurs have been a basket case for a long time. First off they have Mourinho, then they have Nuno, who's not the right man to follow, and then they have Antonio Conte, who basically went in with a flamethrower and set fire to the face. So, but now he's at Forest, and I'm not entirely sure that he's going to be able to do what they think he's going to do there. You also have Palace. We're going to pull the trigger on Roy Hodgson at some point. Why on earth? I love this idea, by the way, that Simon Jordan not only has told people that appointing Company was a mistake, Burnley were going to get relegated to the League One, and he's now on TalkSport or TalkShite saying that they should have sacked Cooper a long time ago. Simon Jordan, the same man who's at a club who gave Roy Hodgson a 2-year contract. Right, well done, lad. You have no clue what you're talking about. But yeah, Hodgson, his kind of time looks to be coming to an end. But speaking of voices in the media again, the newspaper that we don't name because they're a bunch of bastards, they tweeted out that Palace had sent out possibly, and I quote, the worst Premier League team in history last weekend to face Manchester City. And Palace then got a 2-2 draw at the Etihad. So just goes to show that particular newspaper not only is populated by wankers, but populated by wankers who don't know anything about football. But anyway, that's kind of thing. So yeah, philosophy and results. I don't know which side of the philosophy and results kind of divide you fall. Let me know in the comments below. I'm kind of interested. But for me, as I say, I'd rather watch entertaining football that's going to lose than I'd rather watch dull football that's going to lose. And the idea that, Burnley is ever going to be one of those who is in the Premier League looking down looking up about, the potentials as opposed to constantly looking over his shoulder. I don't think that's how football is these days. And yeah, if you think differently, let me know in the comments below. If you want to give me a like and subscribe, that would be fantastic. If you want to click the notifications bell so that you get notification whenever I post new content, that'd be brilliant. Just to close off, I'm not going to be at the games over Christmas because I always take a break over Christmas. But thank you very much for following this channel. Thank you for your comments, not only below, but also if we met up at a game or anything like that. They've all been positive. They've all been supportive. I really appreciate. I am only kind of doing this for myself, but you've found it entertaining, and that's fantastic. So I wish you all the best for the Christmas and the New Year, and all together now, up the Clarets.